Hello, everyone. This first chapter fave is The Story Collector by Kristen O'Donnell Tubb, and I have this first. So, this is the book jacket because I'm going to read you the book from Sora. So, you have access to this book for free on Sora as well, if interested. Kristen O'Donnell Tubbs' The Story Collector is a historical fiction middle grade novel inspired by the real life of Viviani Joffrey Fedler, born and raised in the New York City Public Library. 11-year-old Viviani Fedler has spent her whole life in the New York City Public Library. She knows every room by heart, except the ones her father keeps locked. When Viviani becomes convinced that the library is haunted, new girl Merritt Mubarak makes fun of her. So Viviani decides to play a harmless little prank, roping her older brothers and best friend, Eva, to help out. But what begins as a joke quickly gets out of hand, and soon Viviani and her friends have to solve two big mysteries. Is the library truly haunted? And what happened to the expensive new stamp collection? It's up to Viviani, Eva, and Merritt, reluctantly, to find out. And then this is from New York Times bestselling author Alan Gratz, who wrote Refugee, which I did another one on. For every book lover who fantasized about getting locked in the library out overnight, The Story Collector is a dream come true. So here we begin. Chapter 1. Baseball. Dewey Decimal 796.357. Some people are story collectors, while others collect seashells or stuffed animals or stamps. Story collectors wrap themselves in words, surround themselves with sentences, and play with participles, even those pesky, perky, dangling ones. They climb over C's and Mount M's and lounge in L's. Soon enough they land in the land of homonyms, then wham! They stumble into onomatopoeia, that lovely creaking, booming bit of wordplay, and that, dear friend, is where our story begins. Crack! The bat swung over Viviani Fedler's left shoulder, then clattered to the terracotta tile floor of the New York Public Library. She shrieked and ran, red hair flying, nothing short of a firework whizzing about the bases. First, she shouted as her foot landed squarely on the pages of The Lost Princess of Oz. Viviani's older brother, John Jr., muttered something unsavory as the ball sailed over his head. John's best pal, Carol Case, scrambled across the floor, slipping and sliding around the massive carved oak tables, until he finally spotted the ball. It was rolling neatly down the aisle between stacks of Modern Priscilla magazine and Whisper. As the children of the building superintendent, the Fedlers had played baseball in many rooms of the library, but the periodical reading room was their favorite. It was a perfect square, and if you squinted, the red tile floor looked just like the clay in a baseball diamond. Second! Viviani yelled as she towed the Bobbsey twins on Blueberry Island. Outside these thick marble walls, a horse and buggy trotted alongside clanking trolleys and honking automobiles over rumbling sideways, and on a clear day, if you leaned just right, you could see the gleaming white spire of the Woolworth Building, the tallest building in the world, from this spot at 5th and 42nd. This room had ample light from multiple windows, and Viviani imagined the trees fluttering in the wind just outside as a stadium full of fans cheering her on. Go, Viv, you can do it! She could hear them screaming now. Head for home, Viviani! Head for home! She could make it. She knew she could make it. She rounded third, a couple of once on a time, and plowed toward a home plate. Carol scooped up the ball and hurled it with a grunt. The ball whizzed past Viviani and flew directly at one of the two-story lead glass windows. A window with frilly woodwork around the sides and thick iron grills holding the glass in place. An expensive window, one that wouldn't fare well on the wrong end of a speeding baseball. At the last moment, John Jr. leapt into the air and thunk. The ball nestled into his leather glove. John Jr. touched the base at the exact moment Viviani had shouted, "Home!" She slammed into him, and the two toppled over the copy of the House of Pooh Corner that served as home plate. Out! Declared John. Am not, said Viviani. R2. Am not, Am not. Strong argument, Carol said. But you are out, Red. Viviani stuck out her tongue at Carol and whirled to her teammate and best friend. Tell them, Eva. Tell them I'm in. Eva twirled a lock of her dark hair around her finger, straightening and releasing a perfect pin curl. She's in. I'm pretty sure she's in. Viviani and John Jr. turned to the umpire. Said John. But it was readily apparent that this umpire would be of no use. At least not where baseball was concerned. The middle Fetteler child, Edouard, sat reading on an overturned garbage can, the ones with the brass lion knockers specially made for the library. His nose was buried deep in first base. Fact, Edouard said into the book, which he'd lifted off the baseball diamond as soon as Viviani had towed it. The national anthem in Oz is the Oz-Spangled Banner. Edouard, Vivian Jr. shouted. Out, Edouard declared, without even bothering to look up. Viviani cleared her throat and prepared to deliver her protest. She'd start with an appeal to Edward's finer points, his studiousness, his quiet strength. Then she'd appeal to his vast logical side. She explained how it was possible for John Jr. to have leapt that high, only to have landed at just the right time and just the right place to tag her at home plate. Finally, she'd nail her argument with this. John Jr. must have, instead, tagged a library goblin, not her. Their father often told stories of the goblins. Helpful little creatures that crept around the library stacks at night when all the patrons had gone home. Edward couldn't resist the 1-2 punch of a compliment plus a mythical creature. Then, if all else failed, she would yell at him. Before Viviani could open her mouth, the children's librarian, Miss Alice Keats O'Connor, entered the room. With a patron. Killjoy, Viviani muttered. Unfortunately, in such a large, high-ceilinged, echoing room, her words were magnified. Viviani cringed. Eva shrank. It's not what it looks like, Viviani said weakly. The keen eyes of Miss O'Connor flew from the panting children to her precious books, scattered about the room. A thunderous frown darkened her brow. Her nostrils flared. Her glasses slipped to the tip of her nose, and she crammed them against her eyebrows with a firm finger. Miss O'Connor puffed up like a balloon. You were playing baseball in the periodical reading room. Okay, it's exactly what it looks like, Viviani said. Carol sputtered a laugh and caught an elbow in the ribs from John Jr. You were playing baseball? Miss O'Connor repeated. In the periodical reading room? And oh, you mangled Pooh. She lifted home base and examined the book in the sunlight, glinting through the thank goodness she hadn't seen it nearly get smashed window. The book had gotten a tad rumpled. A few pages were bent, and a large dusty footprint graced the back cover. Only improves it, if you ask me, Carol whispered. Load of treacle. That was quite the wrong thing to say, as Pooh held a special place in the hearts of all children's librarians, especially Miss O'Connor's. The librarian considered trampling a book tantamount to trampling the author, him or herself. Out! She stamped her heel. Bam! Against the tile floor, and jabbed a finger at the door. Carol and John Jr. chuckled and dashed into the hallway. Viviani, who knew Eva's shyness, would keep her glued to the spot, grabbed her friend by the wrist and pulled her toward the frosted glass doors. Miss O'Connor was positively red-faced. Your coloring looks really pretty when you get all flustered like that, Miss O'Connor, Viv said as she and Eva scooted past. Especially against your pearl earrings, Viv chuckled. And if you think about it, Miss O'Connor. Viviani, Joffrey, Fetteler, Miss O'Connor said, pushing her glasses up her nose again. I do not want to hear one of your tales right now. See, friend, here's the trouble with having a storyteller's soul. Not everyone enjoys a good story all the time, not even librarians, because sometimes the adults in them overtakes their story-loving side. Too often, people think of stories as fluff or nonsense. Some might even go so far as to call them lies. But, Vivian began. Miss O'Connor turned redder still and shook her pointer finger. Out! Edward never once looked up from the Lost Princess of Oz. Out! That's exactly what I said.